Let's be honest, do you ever feel like you're getting in your own way? Dr. Judy Ho knows all about this as she writes in her book, Stop Self-Sabotage. Dr. Judy is a triple board certified and licensed clinical and forensic neuropsychologist and a tenured professor at Pepperdine University. You might have seen her co-hosting The Doctors or Face the Truth on CBS, among dozens of other media credits on CNN, NBC Nightly News, and more. We talked about how you can stop self-sabotage and get on track to achieve your goals. This is our conversation. For people who don't know, can you explain what self-sabotage is?
Yes, self-sabotage is just when we get in our own way despite our best intentions. And sometimes we're not conscious of it, and other times we are, but then we sort of have this kind of hopeless attitude towards it. Like, oh, well, I sabotaged my diet, I sabotaged my relationship. And then you kind of just move on. And that's really why I decided to write this book.
Yeah, it was really crazy for me reading it because I wasn't someone who considered like any of the things I dealt with to be self-sabotage. And then I was reading through all of the examples and I was like, oh, wait, I do a lot of this. Can you just walk through a brief overview of what the 6 steps are?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 6 steps really start with a self-assessment where you learn about your own underlying drivers for self-sabotage. And I organize it into an acronym called LIFE. And LIFE stands for L, low or shaky self-esteem, I, internalized beliefs from childhood, F, fear of change or the unknown, and E, excessive need for control. And people have a variety of those types of elements that impact them specifically. And you first find out, well, which one of these are contributing to my self-sabotage? After that step, you move on to identifying your thought triggers, the way that we think and perceive our events that lead us down the path of self-sabotage. And I talk about 6 different categories of thought triggers to watch out for. Again, through self-assessment, you find out which of these 6 are the most prominent for you. Once you've realized that, then you can learn how to actually change some of those thought triggers. And it involves us understanding that thoughts are not everything. They're not always real. They're not even always reflective of the truth. And so getting ready to start questioning your thoughts, really understanding what balanced thoughts mean, and managing the difficult emotions that can come up as a result of you having some of these thoughts. Once you finish that process, then we move on to what I call the ABCs. And the ABCs is all about identifying which behaviors are problematic for you and lead to consequences you don't want, and then shifting those behaviors into more productive and healthy behaviors and starting to set them up as a habit or routine. And in order to do this, it's really important that you not only assess what leads you down the path of that behavior you didn't want, but also how do you come up with an alternate game plan? And so the next step is really about coming up with this alternate game plan and really understanding what it means to have lasting motivation and lasting willpower. And when things get tough, how do we keep going in the right direction? Then the last couple of steps are all about connecting your goals to your values. It's really important that as a goal-driven society, we actually connect the things that we say we want to things that feel like if they're serving a bigger purpose for us. They're reasons for why we exist, how we want people to remember us when we're gone one day. These really big ideas that help us to stay the course and to understand the meaning of a goal, which makes us to want to pursue it more. And the last step is really just bring it all together in what I call the blueprint. People are very excited about vision boards. And I think it's because visualization tools are very good for human beings. The problem with a lot of vision boards, though, is that it doesn't give you a prescription on how to get there. And so my blueprint is different because it's like the blueprint for a house. When you look at this program that you've put together, you literally will know where you need to go to build the life that you want. And all the specific steps are on your blueprint.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to read this in the context of this year and everything that's gone on. One of the things you mentioned, I think, in the intro of the book is how stress can compound how we self-sabotage. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yes, definitely. When we're stressed, we are overloaded. Cognitively, we're exhausted. And that's when emotion dysregulation happens more often. We're more impulsive. We might not make decisions that are the best for ourselves. And that's because our minds are trying so hard to simplify and at the same time deal with that chronic fight or flight that stress brings on. And it's actually not the way human bodies are built. Human bodies are built to deal with punctuated moments of fight or flight. And we're very good at that. But if the fight or flight sort of phenomenon goes on for days or weeks at a time, it really erodes our ability to have motivation, feel productive, do the things that we know are good for us. And so that's why self-sabotage can be a trap that you fall into more when you're really stressed and not managing it well.
One of the things that I think is interesting that's come up with a lot of my friends talking to them is no one really thinks this is a good time for self-improvement from what I've heard. A lot of my friends, like, yeah, they get, like, even the ones who've had accomplishments, like getting a new job or starting a new relationship, they really quickly brush that aside and say it's not important. I feel like there's a narrative that's come about almost that if you're not upset all the time, you're not angry all the time right now, you're a bad person, you have to stay in that state. But I would love to hear how this can be an opportune time to actually work on beating self-sabotage.
I think part of it is that people right now, especially with the pandemic and all of these unknowns, are thinking, I just am trying to survive. I'm not even trying to be my best self or whatever the case that may be when you think about this idea of self-development. But really, self-development and self-improvement is really just about making sure that you're cultivating joy every day in your life and you're living a life full of purpose. And especially when we're stressed and especially when we're feeling like we don't have control about a lot of things, that's when we need that the very most. We need to feel like we're in control of our lives, that we have agency, and that we're cultivating joy no matter what's going on around us. And that's really what I think self-development is. And that's what stopping self-sabotage is. It's really taking the best care of yourself and living a life that is authentic and true to you and makes you feel like it's fulfilling a larger purpose. And that helps us to connect to the rest of our community too. So it's the perfect time to do it.
So I took the life quiz, and the area that I need to work on the most is the L, the lower shaky self-concept. And I feel like that's something a lot of people are dealing with right now, especially if you lost your job or your career wasn't where you thought it was going to be, or a project you were working on kind of fell to the wayside. What would be your advice for the first step for someone who's in that position and kind of feels like they're starting from scratch?
If you don't think that you deserve good things, then there's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy that happens. And so what I find is that when people have that lower shaky self-concept, it's not that they never feel good about themselves, but it's that how they feel about themselves is very much tied to what's happening in a given day, what somebody says to them, other people's judgments of them. And the first step is really to start to cultivate self-esteem internally so that it can be more solid, that it's less permeable to what happens on a day-to-day basis, and it's less shaky. And one of the most important things is to really understand your inherent value as a human being, that your value doesn't come from your accomplishments. Your value doesn't even come from your positive qualities. Your value just comes from you being a human on this earth, somebody who's trying to do the best that they can. So I oftentimes ask people to make a what we call like a self-identity square or self-identity circle, where you put your name in the middle and then you write down the different things that you feel like your identity is tied to. They could be personality traits, they could be some of your achievements, but they could also be your relationships. They could be that I'm a daughter, I'm a girlfriend, a wife, all of these different things. And oftentimes I find that when people struggle with self-esteem, it may be in certain areas, like maybe their romantic life or maybe their career. But then when they reflect on these other areas in which their role serves a purpose, like I'm a friend, I'm a daughter, I'm a wife, I'm a husband, that people start to see their value, that they're there for somebody else and they're there to provide value in someone else's life, to lift them up sometimes when they're having difficulty, to help. And those things start to help the individuals start to solidify a more comprehensive self-concept that's not just based in certain specific areas of your life.
When you're working on that basis of just having the foundation of a good, strong self-concept, do anxiety and depression affect that at all, if that's the place from which you're starting? Because I know a lot of people are dealing with that as well right now.
Yeah, I think that as a society, we tend to suppress or want to avoid our negative feelings, but negative feelings are nothing to be scared about. Feelings are transient, and the less you fight them, the more quickly they dissipate. And so if you are struggling with anxiety or depression right now, and recent surveys have shown that since COVID started, up to 35% of individuals are actually suffering clinical depression and anxiety. It's at an all-time high, and it makes sense. So first of all, realize that you're not alone. It's very common. But secondly, understand that even the happiest individuals will sometimes feel anxious and will sometimes feel depressed, even if it's just for a few hours or a couple of days at a time. And it's really about still continuing to live a life that is full of meaning when you feel that way. So sometimes when people feel depressed or stressed, they're thinking, okay, well then I'm not going to deal with that until I feel better. And actually then it becomes a sort of a problem on top of a problem, because if you're already depressed and then you're saying, I'll wait until I feel better to do the things that I want to do, to exercise, to hang out with my friends, to call a family member, then it actually makes you more depressed, because the more isolated you feel and the more disengaged from things that you know are important to you, the more it fuels your depression. So the more important lesson there is, as you're working on your self-esteem and just getting better from your depression or anxiety, tell yourself that even if you're feeling this way, you're still going to do the things that have meaning to you in your life. So if community is meaningful for you, even when you're depressed, do one small thing that day that makes you feel like you are getting together with your community. It can just be a simple text or an email. Don't give up on those things that you know have meaning for you when you're not feeling well. And of course, then the byproduct is, by you engaging in those meaningful activities, you're lifting yourself out of that depression and anxiety in a much quicker fashion that feels authentic.
I also love the idea of determining what is ultimate truth. I have a mentor who always says there's two truths to every situation, a positive and a negative one. Pick which one you're going to go with. But for someone who's spiraling right now, what are some ways that we can comb through our thoughts to get to what is the ultimate truth?
I think the most important thing is that all human beings are a little bit of catastrophizers. We're always looking for danger and we're trying to avoid danger because we want to survive. That makes sense. But maybe people feel like their thoughts are kind of on a runaway train right now. And so the most important thing is actually to bring it back to what's happening today and asking yourself, what's one thing that I can do to improve my situation? That's a really simple activity that you can do whenever you feel overwhelmed. Is what's one thing I can do right now to improve my situation? Just ask yourself that question when you feel overwhelmed, and then do that thing. One of the things that makes us feel like our survival is at risk when we feel like we can't control things. And there's a lot in our life that we can't control. And the fun is, most of the things that we tend to worry about are things that we have no control over at all. So really bringing it back down to the basics and say, what's the one thing that I can control, and then do that thing. And that can really, really help you in the middle of a crisis. I also think that more than ever right now, it's so important to return to the basics. I mean, people are probably thinking, well, yeah, exercise, eat healthy, sleep well, blah, blah, blah. But those things are so important, because when you have those things in place, then your body and mind don't feel like they're in fight or flight all the time. You're giving your mind and body a chance to relax and restore, which is the other side of that coin that we all need. And so more than ever, you need to prioritize your energy and your boundaries. And if it means that you get a little less done today because you want to go to bed a little earlier and really get some good rest, you need to do it.
You talked about earlier too, I wanted to go back to kind of going back to basics. Do you have any advice specifically for someone who's really been hit hard by this year, who might have lost their job, lost a loved one, lost their home, of where they can start unpacking all of this?
Well, I think the most important thing is understand that you really do need community, even though you probably want to isolate more than ever. And even if it just starts with one or two of the most important people in your life that you can share that with, I would definitely make sure to reach out to them and let them know that you're going through a hard time. And if it is something that you feel like you're overwhelmed and trying to manage yourself, or even with your family, and maybe perhaps you don't want to put all of that on your family and loved ones, it's always okay to get a professional opinion. It's always okay to reach out for help. And more than ever now, people are reaching out to counselors for the first time and saying, I just need someone to talk to for maybe a few sessions. And because of the pandemic, telehealth has been so readily available that you can do it in your own home, and it's private, and you don't even have to give your name. Most of these online platforms for telehealth ask for a pseudonym. So you can really feel good about protecting your privacy. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's important to understand that professional support is there, and that's what it's for, to kind of get you through these difficult times in your life. And a lot of people still struggle with stigma getting professional help, but getting counseling doesn't mean anything other than that you just need a little bit more support today. And that's all.
Guys, I learned so much from Dr. Judy. If you love this episode, make sure to subscribe, because I'm going to have her on again closer to the new year. We're going to talk about how you can set goals you can achieve. For now, you can head to drjudyho.com to take the life quiz and pick up her book, Stop Self-Sabotage. Until next week, you can follow me at Meagan Lynn TV. I'm so happy you're here, and I can't wait to go on this journey together of becoming our best selves.